Hello, everyone. It's time for Vanished Chicagoland Stories, the podcast. I'm your host, Pete Costanas. This is episode 168, season 7. Today's date is October 8th, 2022, and thank you for joining me today. On today's program, I will talk about radio and TV personality Jim Conway, who anchored the news in Chicago, also had his own talk show. And I'll talk about his biography and his career. Also, 2 anniversaries I'll discuss on the program. First one will be the 55th anniversary of the closing of Riverview Park in Chicago. That was a dark day when that happened. And also the 60th anniversary of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And I'll talk about my memories of watching the show. And it should be a lot of fun. So the show aired on WMAQ TV Channel 5 at 10:30 in the evening, Monday through Friday. So this will be fun. Okay. Right now, the program will go into a commercial break. And this program is brought to you by Crisco, all vegetable shortening. And here's a commercial from 1981 featuring Loretta Lynn, the country singer. She just passed away this week. And so sit back and enjoy, everyone, and I'll be right back. Thank you.
You know, I spend so much time working. I can't always take care of my family the way I'd like to. So when I get home, I try to make it up to them with lots of hugs and kisses and the best tasting food I can put on the table. And that's why I use Crisco and nothing else. Oh, there was a time when I tried some of the other shortenings, but I came back to Crisco. And look how nice and brown Crisco fries my chicken.
Sure tastes good too, Mom.
No greasy taste either. Oh, and look what Crisco will do for a pie. Makes my pie crust flaky as all get out. That's flaky.
It's good to have you home,
Oh,
Mom.
you mean it's good to have the cook at home?
All vegetable, no cholesterol, Crisco.
Crisco will do you proud every time.
Okay, everyone, I am back. I hope you enjoyed the commercial for Crisco. As for the product is still around. It's been introduced by Procter & Gamble in 1911, over 100 years ago. And you use that for frying or, baking pies. It makes your pie crust flaky, according to commercials like that. And I remember a classic episode of All in the Family, starring Carol O'Connor and Rob Reiner. And it was an episode where there was a heat wave and their air conditioner broke in their house. And Rob Reiner's character, Mike Stivitt, was at the refrigerator and he was looking for something to eat. And then Archie wanted a beer or something, I guess, or something to eat. So he got frustrated. So he handed Mike a can of Crisco and here, you eat this. And that's what Archie said to Mike. And he goes, "This is Crisco." And Archie says, "Well, you eat anything." Oh, that's a classic scene. I love this show. And, as for Loretta Lynn, who she was the spokesperson for the commercial for Crisco all the way from the 80s, probably late 70s and 80s. And there was also all butter Crisco. I don't know if they still make that. I haven't seen it. And unfortunately, she passed away on Tuesday, October 4th, which was my birthday. And that's very sad. She was a wonderful singer. They made a movie out of her life, Coal Miner's Daughter. I've seen the movie that starred Sissy Spacek. That was a wonderful movie. I saw it in the theater. I think I did. No, I did not see it in the theater. I saw it on TV. And they played their classic songs and all that. And it's a shame because she seems like a lovely lady, and she was 90 years old. That's she's one of the queens of country music. I'm not a big fan of that type of music, but we do this out of respect like that. And the reason I didn't do a podcast Tuesday, of course, it was my birthday. I had a lot of birthday greetings from texts, messages, comments. Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you. It was wonderful. I had a wonderful, lovely day celebrating. Okay. At the beginning of the program, I said I will talk about the radio and TV personality Jim Conway, also the 55th anniversary of Riverview Park in Chicago, and the 60th anniversary of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Okay, and right now, I'm going to talk about Riverview Park. Why not? Let's get started with that, because the reason is I posted a photo of the Bob's roller coaster on Monday, on October 3rd, and I had no idea this was going to happen. I posted this on my Facebook page on Van Chicagoland, and it just took off. I shared it, a few groups, and also, but all of a sudden, people saw that, and then they shared it everywhere. And they commented and commented. They're still commenting, as far as I know. And this is like a few days ago, and that the views of that post on Van Chicago went through the roof. It was amazing. Last I looked, were about 600,000 people. That's like a metropolis. That's like a city that saw that, and they remember what rides they rode, and who they were with, and they got sick riding them, all kind of like that. And but this on October 3rd, 1967, that the park officially closed, and that was very sad. A lot of people expected to continue, for the 1968 season. Didn't happen. I heard they got a good offer from the land, and whoever owned it at the time, it wasn't George Schmidt. He's the original owner, so it must be his relatives, or it could be him. I don't know if he passed away then. And they took the offer, and then they started auctioning off the rides, and they dismantled everything, and it's a shame, And most of the rides that a lot of people remembered. First, I'll tell you where it was located. I mean, Riverview Park was at 3300 Northwestern Avenue. That was Belmont and Western. Right near it was Lane Tech High School. WGN Studios, not too far from there, on Bradley Place over there. I've been there. And I never went to Riverview because when it was closed, I was 3 years old. So I never knew about the park until later. Over the years, I never was interested about that. But then in the 80s, I went to DeVry Institute of Technology, and that was on the property of Riverview Park. And I went to school there for 3 years. And then when I started Van Chicagoland, I wanted to do, I posted things, places, people no longer exist. And then I decided to do a video about Riverview Park. As I did that, I collected photos all over the internet, also from some books. I got permission from the author of the book. Thank you. Derek G., that's his name. Then I compiled it and then put it in the video. And when I first published it, it was very popular. A lot of people loved it. It was shown on Channel 9 in the morning. Thank you, Marcus Leshock. That was a great day. I loved that. And because he's a huge fan of roller coasters. But then people start talking about the rides. So I'm going to read off some of the rides that a lot of people remember. Of course, there was the Bob's. That was the most memorable one of all. And it was fast and crazy. And that was built in 1924, and it stopped where, it ceased operation when Riverview closed in 1967. So, and that was one of the most popular roller coasters of all time at Riverview Park. But there were others. It was also the Comet, the Silver Flash, and then it changed to Flash. There was also Fireball. That was Introduced in 1959, but before that, it was called the Blue Streak. A lot of people remembered that, older than me, that is. Also, there was the Jetstream that replaced the Greyhound. A lot of people like the Greyhound, but I think it got old, and that only ran about 3 years into that. And there were other roller coasters. One of the first ones was the Velvet Coaster or the Figure 8, and there was the Jackrabbit, and there was the Wild Mouse. Also, other attractions at the park were Aladdin's Castle. That was the Fun House. Remember that? The Chutes, the water ride. Oh, that looked like a lot of fun. I like that. There was another fun house. It was called Hades. Also, the Rotor. It was like a spinning ride and like that. And there were rides of the Rotor in other parks like that. And there was a Tilt-A-Whirl. That's one of my favorites. Also, there was a ride called Thousand Islands, but then it became Mill on the Floss. Excuse me. And in 1950, they renamed it the Tunnel of Love, and that stayed until the end. So you remember that. And also, there was the Flying Turns. It was like a wooden bobsled ride, and you would go all over the place. It opened in 1934, and a lot of people remember that ride. They loved it, and it was originally from the Chicago's World's Fair. And it opened in 1934, and then it moved to Riverview Park. I apologize for that. Also, there was the parachutes. You float down with a parachute. That looked like fun. I heard there was there was a couple that got married, and there was a woman in her bridal gown coming down doing that. That's funny. Also, there was the Freak Show. There was the Flying Scooter, the Boomerang, Stratostat, the Calypso, the Flying Cars. Oh, that was shown on WGN. The picture of that was kind of cool. Also, the Hot Rods. There were little cars like that. Let's see. They had a Ferris wheel, the Paratrooper, Bump 'em. There were bumper cars, of course, and they had a racetrack like that. And last but not least, there was a Carousel. And the Carousel is the only ride that exists from Riverview Park, and that is at Six Flags over Georgia in Atlanta. And I always want to go see it. If I ever go to Atlanta, I want to go to that park and see that Carousel. I want to ride it because that's historical and it's beautiful. Oh. We'll see about that until I'm fully recovered. But I am sort of fully recovered. But if I could travel, I could do that. So we'll see. I'd love to see it. I don't think I'll go see it this year because it's closing soon. So maybe next year. Okay. And then, like I said before, Riverview Park closed in 1967, but the memories linger on for everybody. And, with social media, and it kept it alive, and it was one of a kind. It was a huge amusement park. It had over 100 rides. Today, we have Six Flags Great America in Gurnee. It used to be called Marriott's Great America. I did a podcast episode about the rides that no longer existed over there. That was a fun episode I did on Van Chicagoland Stories. But prior to that, when Riverview closed, there was Adventureland that opened about, I think, 1962 in the 60s. And that was located in Addison, Illinois. That lasted until the late 70s. And also during that time, Old Chicago opened, and that was the first indoor amusement park. And it had shops that was located in Bolingbrook. I never went there. I wish I did, but I knew a lot of friends went there, of course. And that lasted about a few years. And that was featured in the movie, I think, The Fury from 1978. And there's scenes of that. And I haven't seen the movie in ages, so maybe someday I'll watch it. and try to catch a glimpse of old Chicago. Like that. I remember the commercials and all that, and they had concerts. It was a fun place. Okay, so that was a sad day when Riverview Park closed, and but memorabilia still exists. You can find stuff on eBay to buy, tickets, travel, brochures, signs. You can find them. And people showed the frame of some picture frames of tickets that shows the Aladdin's castle. That's kind of cool. Okay. And also the slogan was "Laugh your troubles away," and the spokesman for Riverview Park was Teuton Baker. He was an entertainer. He sang. He seemed like a very nice man. Huge man. He used to live in my old neighborhood in Roseland. So, I failed to mention, the park opened on July 2nd, 1904. So it wasn't really a park at first. It was like a shooting, shooting gallery, like like that. And then one day somebody decided to, have picnics and invite the entire family. And then somebody suggested, why don't we bring, a ride, amusement ride. And they brought a roller coaster, I believe. And that's how it started. So that's, like I said, I keep repeating that. It's a wonderful place. I wish we had it again. Okay. Next up, I will talk about The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. And let's see, The Tonight Show started in 1954. It aired on NBC, which back then was WNBQ, not WMAQ. They changed the letters in, I think, 1964, around that. And they with Tonight Show, the first hosts were Steve Allen. He hosted until about 3 years. He was a comedian. He was from Chicago, and then he went to Hollywood. He was a funny man. I liked him. And then the next host was Jack Parr, and he took over, and he was there for about 5 years. And he was a very controversial man, and he was a good host, very easygoing guy, but he got in trouble with the censors at the network, and then he just walked. I think he walked away in 1960, and he did come back, but then he quit altogether. So they had to find a host. So they had guest hosts before that until they chose Johnny Carson, and they asked him, and he said, yes, I will host a show, but he was contracted to another network on another show, so they had to wait, to start. So the first show debuted on October 1st, 1962. And his sidekick was Ed McMahon, the announcer. And we all know, I'll talk about him in a second. And that was in New York. And 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City, not in California. I'll talk about that in a second, when he moved. And his first guests were Rudy Valley, Joan Crawford, Tony Bennett, Mel Brooks, and of course Groucho Marx. Okay, so right now I'm going to play the very first show. This is an audio. The first show does not exist anywhere. I think they were erased or lost. Luckily, they found the audio of the introduction of the show. But in the beginning, so I'm going to play that. In the beginning, that's Johnny Carson speaking. And so you will hear the introduction of the show, and then Johnny Carson speaks, for about a minute, and it's fascinating television history. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you, everyone.
October 1st, 1962 is a day I'll always remember. I was 36 years old, taking my place as host of America's most popular late-night program, The Tonight Show.
Tony Bennett, Mel Brooks, the Phoenix Singers, Skitch Henderson with the NBC Orchestra and me. I'm Ed Mcmahon. Right now, let's welcome the fellow you waited 6 months to see.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This is kind of an emotional thing for me because I've known about this show for a long time. And the newspapers and the magazines, and I've probably been interviewed 150 times in the last 9 months since I've known about this. As I say, you work up to it. We come over here this afternoon. We meet the guests that are on the show. And you get kind of charged up. I don't mean to be maudlin about it. But I know that tonight a lot of my friends are watching all over the country. And I only have one feeling as I stand here knowing that so many people are watching. I want my man.
Well, I made it through that first night with the help of Groucho Marx, Rudy Valley, Joan Crawford, Tony Bennett, and Mel Brooks. I could never have imagined I would walk through that curtain almost 5,000 times in 30 years.
Okay, everyone, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed the introduction of The Tonight Show that aired on October 1st, 1962. Oh, that was a great find of that. And they didn't introduce Groucho Marx, but he was on the show. And there's pictures of him on the internet with Johnny Carson. Okay, and show did very well in the ratings wise. And then it moved to California until 1972 or 73, around that time, and Ed McMahon followed Johnny Carson, and also the band leader. First, there was the NBC Orchestra, and that was led by Skitch Henderson. I remember him, and then until 1966, and then there was another one. His name was Milton DeLugg, and he took over, and then it was Doc Severson, and he took over, and he's still alive to this day. I think he's in his 90s. It's a wonderful. He wore these funny suits, and Johnny Carson made fun of him. So like that. So most guests that appeared on with Johnny Carson were stand-up comedians, musicians, TV stars, movie stars, also politicians. You know, they were interviewed, and Johnny Carson never talked. He never offered his opinions on politics. Thank goodness. You know, he kept to himself. That's very respectful to doing that. And so in the beginning of the program, you know, Ed McMahon would introduce Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show, and then he would say who will be on the show. And then he would say, "Here's Johnny." We all remember that. That's taken from The Shining with Jack Nicholson. That movie still scares me. And then when Johnny Carson appears, you know, from the curtains, and then they played the theme song of Tonight Show, which was written by Paul Anka, the singer, and then he would go, "Oh," that was Ed McMahon, and then after Johnny Carson did his monologue, and then he would do the golf swing, and he did that. You know, on Rowan Martin's Laughing, they did Dick Martin did that on his show, which Johnny Carson appeared on that. And then they would do sketches first before the guests would be introduced. And he created some characters, very famous characters. There was Floyd Arturo. He was a TV, you know, he did editorials, and there was Art Fern. He did Tea Time Movie. I remember that with the matinee lady. One famous matinee ladies was Paula Prentice. There was also Teresa Ganzel. That was in the 80s. Also Carol Wayne. You know, she did that. And there was Aunt Blabby. You know, Johnny Carson dressed like an old lady. She was a gossip. So it's funny. And he also did Ronald Reagan during the 80s. He ridiculed him to death. He really did. It was terrible. And one of my favorites was Karnak the Magnificent. You know, and he he was like a medium, and he was like a psychic, and he predicted. One of his famous ones was also Ed McMahon's was they were all in a mason jar, a mayonnaise mason jar, all the letters. So you take one out, tear it on the side, blow on it, and open. And first he would say "Sis boom ba." He would just place the card on his forehead, and then he would open that just like I described, and he said, that's the sound when a sheep explodes. I just love, so that's funny. I like that. And let's see. And then when he interviewed guests, he was very easygoing, and a lot of famous people were discovered on the Tonight Show during his tenure there. And my memories of watching the show, I didn't watch it all the time. When I was a kid, I watched reruns of other shows in Chicago. Like, for example, there was the Late Movie on Channel 2 and CBS. They show all these movies. They also showed Kolchak, the Night Stalker on there, and that's where I caught that. I saw the show when it originated in the 70s and on Channel 7 on WLS. And they showed reruns on the Late Movie sometimes. They showed Starsky and Hutch. I don't know what else. Other ones. I can't think of it. Or The Avengers or something like that. And then, probably Columbo. Yeah, they showed Columbo. I remember that. And also other shows I watched during 10:30 were Channel 9 had not when movies were movies. I think it was Sundays, but she showed old movies. If I saw a movie that was interesting, I watched that. Channel 7, I don't know what was on the air at that time. I couldn't think of it. But later on in the 80s was Nightline, if you like the news. Ted Koppel hosted. That was based on the Iran situation, hostage situation at the time. The 7 when I was in high school. And of course, on Channel 32, I watched that a lot. And also Channel 44, they showed old reruns of TV shows. Like, for example, on 44, there was Get Smart. There was F Troop. Right after the White Sox game, I used to watch that. Also on Channel 32 was the shows were like Mary Hartman. There was The Best of Groucho, You Bet Your Life, the quiz show hosted by Groucho Marx, and let's see what else. Dark Shadows, when it was rerun. That was good. And of course, Night Gallery. So most of the shows I have on DVD, but it was a beautiful time watching that time. And of course, when I got older, then I started watching the Tonight Show probably every night. So everyone did, older people did. They were in bed, they were on the couch, or like that, or like the day was winding down, you want to relax, and Johnny Carson would make you laugh, and then you go to bed, And the next day you talk about him and who he had on, like that. So the show lasted for 30 years when he hosted. So his last show was May 22nd, 1992. And I remember the last show. His guests they showed clips and all that. And two guests were Bette Midler, and she sang a song. And also Robin Williams. And he did some comedy bit. Oh, he was hilarious. God bless him. He's gone. God bless him. It's too bad he died. And then, Johnny Carson officially announced that he would retire. He didn't want to do it anymore. He did this for 30 years, and that was it. He wasn't seen much after that. He appeared on David Letterman, and that was it. He did a voice over on The Simpsons. He did a guest voice. And then Jay Leno took over, and I watched him all the time. I liked him; he was funny. And then he left, and then they brought in Conan O'Brien because he was on after David Letterman left, and he went to CBS. But Conan O'Brien only lasted about a year. It was not very successful. I liked him, but it didn't work. And then Jay Leno returned for a few more years, and then now we have Jimmy Fallon. which he's funny. I like him. So, but this is the Tonight Show for today. This is for the 21st century. So that was that's a great show. And it's memorable. You can find clips of the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson on YouTube if you'd like. There's DVDs if you want to buy the best of his shows. One memorable thing that Johnny Carson said, before I forget, it was during the Reagan era, and he said that Ronald Reagan was visiting his ancestral country in Ireland. He was going to go see his relatives there, or his his family was born. And the funniest thing is he was driving through the countryside, and he noticed a leprechaun standing on a toadstool. And when Reagan looked at the leprechaun, you know what the leprechaun did? He dropped his pants and mooned him. So he said, Ed McMahon laughed so hard, and that was so funny. I haven't forgotten about that. It was hilarious. Every time Johnny Carson was tell a joke, he started laughing himself. He said some silly things, but he made fun of a lot of politicians, mostly Nixon and Ford. Oh my God. And not Clinton, not yet. Jay Leno did that after that. Oh, it's fun. So, he was a wonderful man. He really was. And he's still missed. Okay. Next up, we will talk about Jim Conway. And a lot of people don't remember. Well, I'm talking about people today. They don't know who he was, but people older than me remember him very well. And he was a television host. He was also a news anchor. And so I'm going to read, I'm going to talk about his career. Yes, I'm going to talk about his career, about how he got started, and all through what he did. And right now, no, not right now. So I'll talk about briefly about him. And he was born here in Chicago on the South Side. I don't know where in the South Side. I wish I knew. And then he went to Milwaukee, and then. And he attended Marquette University High School in Milwaukee. And then, I don't know if he went to college. I'm not sure. Yes, he did. I'm sorry. He did. He attended Marquette University. Excuse me. And then he got hired at WBBM in Chicago. And that was in the 40s. And he was the first announcer in Chicago when Pearl Harbor got hit by the Japanese, the attack. And that happened December 7, 1941, of course. And I wish there was a recording of that. I'd like to hear it, and he was very young, when that happened. And he also was in the Navy, and he served during World War II, and he was in the Navy Reserve for many years. And after the war, he continued his work at WBBM on the radio, and he hosted a radio show called Shopping with the Missus. I never knew that. And he co-hosted with that show. I don't know who was the host of that. Maybe it was Lee Phillip. I don't think it was her. I'm not sure. Probably, because she did a lot of television at the time. And then he hosted a variety show. It was called In Town Tonight, and it aired at 10:30 on weeknights on Channel 2. And that was during the 50s. There's a clip of that on YouTube if you want to find it and see that. He was very calm, very polite, like that. And then he left the show in 1959, did some voice-over work at Kellogg's for, cereal commercials, probably radio or television. Then he came back in Chicago in 1960, and he got hired to do the first. He was the first anchor to do the news on Channel 9, and that was the first news program on WGN-TV, Channel 9 in Chicago, and it aired at 10 o'clock. So it went head to head with the news on Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7. 32 came later, but I don't think it aired at 10. I think it aired at 9. And then he joined, not WBM, he joined WMAQ-AM on the radio, and he was a host for a few years, and he did interviews, and he hosted a morning show called Americana. He did that. And then he left WMAQ around August 1964, and then he joined WLS, Channel 7. He left the news program on Channel 9, which on Channel 9, this was I found an ad of that, where that the show was going to debut. And in the ad was, let me try to remember. So it was Carl Grayson. He was on the news. I don't know if he co-anchored with him, maybe, or he did other things, but he was the original voice of Creature Features. He introduced a poem, and then it was Marty McNeely that did that. That show still scares me, And also on the program was Jack Burkhouse. He did the news, and believe it or not, who did the weather forecast was Ned Locke, Ringmaster Ned from Bozo's Circus. I didn't know he did that, until I found out. But I think there's a picture on the internet somewhere that shows him, in a suit, dressed like a meteorologist, pointing at a map, with all the signs that it's cloudy, low pressure, high pressure, rain and all that. Oh, I would love to see that, And, because a lot of people did a lot of duties at the time in Channel 9. They still do to this day. A lot of people did the weather, they did the sports, they did other segments, and I wish I've seen that. So he hosted the show for a few years on Channel 9. Then he went to Channel 7 in 1964, and he hosted a morning program called Jim Conway's Morning Show. And it was very popular in the morning. And then he also he interviewed people, politicians, and did that, and also reported the news, And then the show was canceled in 1968, and then he hosted a radio show on WGN AM 720 for a few months in 1968. He hosted that. And then he got hired again in Channel 9 to do another morning show. He did that. And that was in 1968. And he did the news. He interviewed people. And he was a great interviewer and a good voice like that. And they ran for 90 minutes. And then the show was shortened in about an hour. And then it went off the air in April 1971. I don't know what happened. But right now I'm going to play a clip of him from the Jim Conway show, and he's saying the news on the show, so you can hear his voice. So here's Jim Conway from the Jim Conway show in the early 1970s. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you, everyone.
Defense Secretary Melvin Laird told the Senate committee today that the Chinese nuclear threat will be one of our gravest security problems in the 1970s. He also said that Russia has under construction, or actually now has in possession, more ICBM launchers than the United States. He also said the United States commanders in Vietnam do not believe it will be possible to reduce American forces, not until Hanoi pulls out all of its troops. Israeli planes were in the skies over Jordan today for the third time in 4 days. They attacked suspected Arab guerrilla positions. Earlier, there was a mortar attack on Israeli forces south of the Sea of Galilee. Pope Paul announced today that he will travel to Uganda, Africa in July to consecrate a new sanctuary and to meet with African bishops. This will be the pontiff's 7th trip outside Italy, the first ever by a pope to Africa. A force of British paratroopers, Marines, and Scotland Yard detectives invaded the Caribbean island of Anguilla at dawn today. Their mission is to return the island to the British Commonwealth. The 6,000 residents offered no resistance. A Memphis man surrendered this morning after holding his 8 children hostage during the night and threatening to kill them if anybody came close. A police inspector talked 27-year-old Charles Keogh into surrendering. And a 3-alarm fire this morning did about $25,000 damage to the office building of the Courtesy Lumber Company at 95th and King Drive. Firemen kept flames from spreading to 2 big lumber sheds. About 50 housekeeping and cafeteria workers at Billings Hospital this morning staged a wildcat strike. A hospital spokesman said the strike was ineffective. And a fugitive from Los Angeles was caught in Bakersfield, California, for a very obvious reason. Police say that 34-year-old Charles Davis was just walking along when a pedestrian noticed something unusual about him and called police, because stenciled across the back of Mr. Davis' trousers were the words, Los Angeles County Jail. Mostly sunny, not so warm this afternoon, high in the lower 60s, beautiful weather, and then tomorrow, chance of a little rain with a high in the 50s. Right now at Midway at 61, at Tribune Tower it's 46, wind out of the east at 10 miles an hour. Coming up, all our guests, and the wrap-up right after this word.
Okay, everyone, I am back. I hope you enjoyed that audio clip of Jim Conway. He had a very versatile, his voice sounded very, strong, very lucid. So, seemed like a very nice man, very intelligent. And then, like I said before, the show, the Jim Conway show on Channel 9, it ended April 1971. And then he returned to television in September of the same year on WSNS Channel 44. I didn't even know that. And it aired in the evenings on every night. But it was only lasted a year. And so because they were changing the programming at the time in 1972. So it was because WSNS started in 1970, and they showed just the stock markets all day long. Just like, remember stock market show like on Channel 26, they showed that all the time. And so they added movies, reruns, classic shows on Channel 44. And then after he left Channel 44, Jim Conway hosted a talk show on the radio, WNUS AM. I remember that. And then he quit broadcasting altogether. And then so he took a job in public relations for the state of Illinois. And he was a spokesman for Secretary of State Jim Edgar, who later on ran for governor. He was the governor of Illinois. And you didn't see much of him after that. So he was not on television anymore. So that's just like that. And then he passed away on, January 22nd, 2016. And he was 94 years old. He lived a long life. That's amazing. I remember reading the article about his death, and I knew about him. I remember seeing him, but I didn't know much about his career. So I had to do a search on the internet to see and, to read about what he did. And I found it fascinating, of what accomplishments he has done. Excuse me. So when he did the first broadcast news on Channel 9 in the evening, that paved the way to other anchormen that we still have today. Also, I remember Jack Taylor. There was John Drury, who came from Channel 7, and others like that. And so now the news is on all day practically, from 4 to 10, then 11 to 1, and 4 to 6, 4 to 7, I think. Yeah. And then again from 9 to 10:30. So WGN's changed a lot. They used to show reruns of TV shows. They still do. There's some of them. And movies, but it's changed so much. So a lot of talk shows at the time were also introduced. There was Lee Phillips. She did Noon Break. She was on at 12 o'clock. My mother watched that show. She liked that. And remember Virginia Graham, Girl Talk? I did a podcast about her a long time ago. And others that paved the way. There was AM Chicago on Channel 7. There was, then later on it became Oprah in the 80s, So he was a great man. He really was. Jim Conway, that is. So thank you for your talents. Okay. So that'll be all for this show. Oh, I did a long one today. Woo. I covered a lot of material. So I'll do a recap what I've done. I discussed the 55th anniversary of Riverview Park closing that officially closed on October 3rd, 1967. Also, the 60th anniversary of the Tonight Show that starred Johnny Carson. Also, radio and TV personality Jim Conway. I talked about his life and his career. I will publish this program shortly. It'll be available wherever podcasts are available: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. It's also on Audible, I believe. Also, it'll be on my YouTube channel, Vanishing Chicagoland Stories. If you care to listen, I'll be ready there. And I also publish this episode on my social media accounts, Vanishing Chicagoland, on Facebook and Twitter. Pardon me. And you can click on it and access, and you can listen wherever you want, on your tablet, on your computer, in your car radio, if you can, pressing the apps. I will not do a podcast episode on Tuesday, which I usually do because I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to see my urologist and see what for my checkup. Probably do one next weekend, but I'll do another podcast. Probably do another podcast of my other podcast, that is TV Oblivion. I'll probably do one tomorrow, so I'll get that set up. Okay. So this is Pico Stennis, your host of Vanishing Chicagoland Stories. Thank you for joining me and bearing with me of listening. This show ran about almost 45 minutes, so I didn't realize it would take that long, but there was a lot of ground to cover, and I enjoyed it. Okay, so long, everyone, and here is Ray Rayner signing off with bye, bye, bye from him, and so I'll hope to hear from you next time. Take care, everybody.
We have to go. Bye, bye, bye.